Welcome to Talon Talks, where we explore energy, AI, entrepreneurship, and investing with the experts building the future. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce Colonel Justin Astro Elliott, commander of the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds, and a star of the Netflix documentary, Air Force Elite Thunderbirds. Astro holds a special place as both a keynote speaker in our leadership series and a podcast guest. Astro spoke at our event this past December, and today we're sharing insights from his keynote. Let's get started.
1953, middle of the Korean War, the United States forms a second demonstration team, but with a very different purpose. The Thunderbirds were formed to unite in divided times during the Korean conflict, to build trust in the American institution, and to build confidence in the population.
Welcome to Houston, Astro, or welcome back, I guess, to Houston. Tell us about your background and maybe your time in Houston.
Absolutely. I mean, it's where I grew up. So my parents moved us here probably when I was 2 years old. I have two younger sisters that were just coming along, and my entire life was here in the city up until I was 18. I went to Lanier Middle School, Oak Forest Elementary, and Jersey Village High School right here in the city. It was pretty formative for me to grow up in this part of town.
Did you graduate from Houston, from high school from Houston?
I did. So Jersey Village High School, 2001 was the last time I lived in the city. And then I went off to college and into the Air Force, and it's good to be back.
That's awesome. What brought your parents to Houston?
So initially what brought them down here was Texas. So my parents are Canadian, both of them. They were from Halifax, Nova Scotia. They met up there. They actually started school up at a school called Dalhousie up in Halifax. And then they followed a professor down to North Texas. So they actually were in the Dallas area initially, wrapped up their education down here, and then moved to Florida for a short time, just chasing jobs, and then ended up back here in Houston, where they raised us and actually still live today.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So were they in the private sector or were they in the public sector?
They were private sector, both of them. So both of them actually studied recreation, which was pretty interesting. So a lot of the physical education that I got growing up came from my parents that studied recreation and sports and physiology and stuff like that. So it was pretty interesting.
So the interest in military and flying, did that start with your parents or did it start with?
Absolutely not. My parents, I would say, on my dad's side, you have to go way, way back to find any military ties. On my mom's side, it was right there. Her father was 38 years in the Canadian Navy and Canadian Air Force. So he was enlisted, worked his way all the way up from 17 to being a chief warrant officer before he retired. And so I had that loose connection to the military, very close with him, but different country, different form of service. He worked initially as a mechanic on aircraft, so he loved airplanes. He used to send me pictures of them. But I didn't have anyone in the family to kind of look at and go, fighter pilot, I want to do that. That actually came from being right here in this city.
That's amazing. So that's some influence from him through the years on learning. Wow.
I think he was the first person to give me this concept of a sense of purpose. I remember talking about, I'll fast forward you to 18. I'm trying to decide what to do going off to college. And, I wanted to be an engineer. I had this loose background where I wanted to fly. It was important to me, but I didn't think it was real. And I remember he was the one sitting across the kitchen table that was the first one to say, hey, you want your life to mean something. There's more to life than just chasing the best job, right, from a financial perspective. And that stuck with me. So
how did you find your way? I guess, when was that aha moment? Was that in high school? Was that in college? Is that what drove your decision to go to Yale ultimately?
Yes. So it was a combination of a few things. I'll start, I guess, just with the local area, how influential that was for me. So growing up in Houston, one of the biggest influences around here is the Space Center and the astronauts that live right here in town. And so for me, that was a big driver, is watching those men and women do extraordinary things. The shuttle era was, it was right in the heart of it when I was growing up. And so you saw inspiring things every day. I think Challenger, you saw some bad things too. I was very young when Challenger blew up. I was in college for Columbia. So NASA always had my attention. And I would say it was probably my core, driving goal my whole life. Again, though, and I think this will speak to a lot of people around here, you don't really know that it's real. It's, even though you're in the same city as these people, it just seems like something that happens on TV. And fighter aviation was the same. When I looked at some of the astronauts' backgrounds, and started to realize that almost all of them in the shuttle era were Air Force test pilots or Navy test pilots, majority flying fighters. I was like, all right, I guess I got to do that. How the heck do you do that? Nobody knows how to go into the military unless they've got it in their family somewhere like you did. And it's hard to find that path. So you asked how I ended up at Yale, and it was a combination of two things. One was swimming. So I was a swimmer here in the city, USS club swimmer. It was really important to me, and that got me recruited. And the schools kind of choose you based on what events they want you to swim. So I looked at all the Ivies. I looked at Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, and the one that matched, that had Air Force ROTC to allow me to start that path towards the Air Force and had the swimming events that I needed, was Yale.
That's amazing. By the way, in honor of Astro, you being here, I'm wearing my NASA socks for this podcast. So, which the fact that I have both actually matching is an achievement. But
that is, yes, I feel the same way.
So tell us more about Yale. How was your experience there? How was it doing ROTC? I remember for me at Columbia, when I was an undergrad there, the ROTC program wasn't active at the time. And it wasn't until I think years after that it actually got reinstated. So would love to hear more about that experience.
Well, that's exactly the same. I think the Ivy Leagues all went through a post-Vietnam era that shut it off the campuses. And if you go back, I remember walking onto Yale as a visitor and going to Woolsey Hall, which is like the big rotunda outside of the main commons area. And you see etched into the stone the names of everyone who's ever died in combat that graduated from Yale. And, in our mind, combat goes back to the World Wars. But when you realize how old these universities are, that went back to the French Indian War, to the American Revolution, to, all this history, Civil War, all the way through. And then it just stops. And that visual for me was pretty impacting. Because, I had come to the university knowing I was going to do ROTC and that's how I was going to pay for my school and that I owed 4 years in the Air Force afterwards. That was kind of in there. But what I did not see coming was on my very first day of ROTC was 9/11, the 9/11, 2001. And, Yale is very close to New York City. I know you were a lot closer. But, for us, even being at a university an hour away, it was pretty impacting. And there was this moment of, okay. Now I'm signed up for ROTC. It's not just to pay for school anymore. This is the real thing, and we are probably going to war. And I was the only person at Yale that was doing ROTC in the 2005 grad group. So I would cross town to University of Connecticut to do my ROTC training, and I would do that twice a week. And then come back and do engineering at Yale and swim. I was swimming twice a day. So it was a really busy time, and one that I took a lot out of. And it really showed me, I think my time at Yale showed me something that I've hung on to really for the rest of my life up to this point. And that's that the busier you are, the more you can do. If you are churning, if every hour in the day is full, somehow you can do more. It's one of those weird psychological things about us, about all of us, I'm sure of it. Whereas if you're idle, you just want to hang on to that idle time. And so my college experience there was no idle time.
Wow.
It was pretty busy.
Did you stay involved in swimming? Did you keep all
I did.
4 years?
Yep.
Okay.
I actually swam through my third year. When I went into year 4, I became the cadet wing commander of the University of Connecticut ROTC detachment. And that was actually too much. So, because now I had to be up there on the weekends and also 2 weekdays during the week. And that was every week. And then you had to plan a syllabus and lead the detachment. And had it been on Yale, I maybe could have done both. Okay. But to do that at a university an hour and a half drive away was just a bit too much. So by that point, I knew swimming had served its purpose. It wasn't going to be my future. I wasn't going to make the Olympics. I was okay, but I wasn't that fast. Whereas the Air Force had very much become the future for me, especially. I got lucky, Charlie. Yeah. I was going to go into the Air Force as an engineer, and then I was actually planning on following on to law school. So I was not going to be a pilot because I had bad eyesight. Well, my junior year, right before pilot selection, the Air Force changed its policy on laser surgery. For the first time, they allowed us to execute laser surgery and then apply to be a pilot. So I did it 1 month later. The dates are still burned into my mind. February 6th policy change, March 6th laser surgery.
Wow.
Here in Houston, actually.
Oh my gosh.
Douglas Koch was the surgeon down here. I ran back home, got laser surgery, and then went back and applied to be a pilot. And it's just amazing to think back on that and how close we were to never achieving that dream.
Wow.
Life would have been okay. I would have been in the Air Force. And engineering is great. Law would have been great, but I'm glad that I got to do what I got to do.
That's awesome. I guess we have Doug to thank for helping you with the LASIK
Absolutely.
surgery and creating one of the best fighter pilot careers over the last 20 years. So it's amazing. Why the Air Force versus with the swimming background, maybe the Naval Academy? Did you ever think about
I sure did.
the Navy?
I very much did. In fact, I'll be honest here for just a moment. Top Gun was pretty influential, right? And that was Navy, and that was about Tomcats and Hornet. My favorite airplane growing up was the F-18.
Oh, awesome.
And so if you had asked 17-year-old me which branch I was going into, I would have said, I'm absolutely going to be a Navy pilot. All right, so what happened? Well, the Naval Academy, I visited the Naval Academy. I visited the Air Force Academy too.
Okay.
And I had a professor at the Naval Academy who was really, really honest. And I remember him saying, when I was visiting on that recruiting trip, he was like, look, we're good. Academically, we're good. We're not as good as the Ivy Leagues. And swimming wise, same thing. I still remember this encounter. This professor he was swimming in the pool. That's how I ran into him, because I was visiting to look at the facilities and everything. So to have a professor at the academy pop out of the water and be like, hi, are you a swimmer? Basically, you should go to Yale. I was like, okay.
You seem to have credibility.
Yes. And Yale had ROTC Air Force, right? Because it was attached to the University of Connecticut. That's true across the university structure of the United States. Some of the ROTC programs are focused on Air Force, some are Navy, some are Army. So a lot of this was luck. If I were to stand up and plant the flag and say I was bleeding blue Air Force from the time I was born, that is a lie. I just ended up in the branch that worked out.
Wow.
Glad I did. It's great.
That's awesome. So take us, and I guess maybe the kind of final point on Yale was you were a mechanical engineer.
I was.
Undergrad. So maybe decisions on that, and has that been helpful in your career in the Air Force?
Very much so. So do I perform calculus and differential equations while flying? Absolutely not. I hope that day never comes. Has it been helpful to understand the mechanics? Yes, very much so. And I went on to do a master's in aerospace engineering and another master's degree following that in flight test engineering. And to be able to put mechanical, aerospace, and flight tests together in here conceptually, again, no calculus, conceptually has been very helpful to understanding how airplanes work. One of my favorite examples is aero-servo-elastic coupling. All right, I know. See, I know you're smarter than you want me to believe, so you're going to understand this. It's when flight controls, air buffet, and the metal structure itself goes resonant. So another word for aero-servo-elastic coupling when it becomes catastrophic is flutter, which is a really cute word for a very, very dangerous thing. It's when you have a resonant frequency hit between your flight controls, which are always trying to feed back on what's going on in the aircraft.
Right.
The metal itself as it bends with the motion, and then the buffet from the airflow over the control surfaces, when those things hit the same frequency, airplanes can explode, literally explode. Like just before you can even think to react, they could just rip a control surface off.
Oh my gosh.
And so things like that kind of tie it all together, right?
Okay.
And that's the sort of thing that a test pilot would look at. That's what they do at Edwards and Eglin all day is look for flutter and resonant frequencies on flight controls. There's a lot to flight tests that people don't think about.
A lot more scientific and technical than I was expecting to get into on that topic. So excited about the F-18. I think we all were, as we talked about earlier, my dad was in the Air Force. I was a T-38 instructor all over Rome, New York, Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi, where I was born, and Randolph, where he ended up finishing most of his career. At what point did you start to get excited about the Air Force, aircraft? And tell us about that first stop after Yale.
So right away, I mean, once I was, this is true about life. Whatever path you choose, that's the one you're on. And there's really no looking back. And so pretty quickly, once I started to realize, yep, I'm going in as an Air Force officer, and then eventually I'm going in as an Air Force pilot, things got exciting in a hurry. because I started to make those mental connections of actually the Air Force has 6 fighter types, Navy has 1. Oh, by the way, we have bombers. There's a whole lot of cool. It's called the Air Force for a reason. Right. We're very good at what we do. We have a lot of different airplane types, and we're very, very good at them. And I'd say that's the defining characteristic of the Air Force is enormous specialty and precision. As an example, our fighter weapons school, which is Top Gun, is 6 times longer than the Navy's.
Wow.
It goes all the way from element fighting, 2-ship versus 2-ship, all the way up to 100 jet packages fighting in large scale combat.
Wow.
And integrating it all together. So it's a great service. I'm very proud to be in the Air Force.
That's fantastic. Well, as an Air Force family as well, I really like the kind of context setting. I think based on a previous conversation, you didn't start on the fighters. You started with a bigger airplane. Was it Dover where you started?
I was at Dover. So this is when you join the Air Force, you actually hit this pipeline, right, for training. And so I was a pilot, but I was not qualified as a pilot. So I went to Dover Air Force Base where I was an executive officer.
Okay.
All right, you know what that is? So that is like the assistant to the commander. All right, very glorious job. A lot of emails, and it was actually an incredible experience because I got to learn about that. From a lieutenant colonel, and this was an operational support squadron that I was the exec for. So it was a lieutenant colonel commander, and just to see how he led his C5 squadron in a time of conflict when they were overseas all the time was really formative for me. It was my first real commander that I worked with. And so just to be clear, I was not a pilot on the C5. I did get to fly on it once. Okay. I got to try to air refuel.
Oh, wow.
In the simulator.
Okay.
In the simulator at Dover in the C5. It is impossible. I have a lot of respect for those guys. Anyone who can refuel a large airplane in the sky is a better pilot than I am. At least than Lieutenant me was, that's for sure. I remember throwing my hands up and being like, okay, I yield. You are amazing human beings, and I will watch.
Well, I think my dad got a lot of that experience when he was in Vietnam with the B-52s because the B-52s were all aerially fueled as well. I remember talking about 12-hour missions, 24-hour missions where they were in the plane for almost a full day. Yeah. So that's interesting.
Yeah, your dad's a better pilot than me. You should interview him.
Well, you'll see him in a few hours. So hopefully I'm looking forward to that connection. So you're at Dover. So at what point then did you move into pilot training?
It was just about 6 months later. It's funny when the way time works when you're 22, you think that was 5 years, but it was about 6 months from summer to December, and then I was in pilot training at Laughlin Air Force Base, Del Rio, Texas.
That's
really
great.
Yes, it's the finest. It was great. It was great. I had nothing else to focus on except flying airplanes, and I was impressed. And I know I've said that much, but let me take you back just for a second because this ties together. Air Force training. My first experience with Air Force training was actually in free fall parachute training at the Air Force Academy, summer of my freshman year. So I just finished freshman year at Yale. I went out to a summer program at the Academy.
Wow.
Jumped out of airplanes. It's the only program out there that you free fall on jump 1. So no instructor, no tandem. You jump out of the plane by yourself. And then you have to pull your own parachute, which seems simple, right? It seems simple. Well, I messed it up. I don't know how, but I ended up with a 1 in 10,000 event called a line over, where my parachute had tied itself into a little propeller and was just spinning me. So there was no down drag. I'm sure there was a little bit, but not enough. Wow. So you jump out of this airplane and pull the chute. And it does not go the way you were told it was going to go. And you're falling. And the Academy instructors have figured out that with multiple jumpers in the air, what not to do is start saying things like pull your reserve chute or jettison right? Because you're going to have 20 19-year-olds all do that. Right? So, because you only have one radio frequency, right? You have a little radio on your chest, and all they will say is check altitude. Literally, that's it. So I'm spinning. I'm falling fast, and I'm just hearing check altitude. I'm like, I know. Like, I can see it. This is not looking good right now. And in seconds, the Air Force training kicked in, the 2 weeks we had spent on the ground. And I still remember throw arch, look, pull, arch, check, TALPAC. And so you jettison your main chute, pull your reserve chute, it pops out, and it worked, and it got me down safely. And then I went and did 4 more jumps. And that's Air Force training. Like, they truly throw you in the deep end, but with so much of a robust, repetitious, just method. It's so methodical that it works. And even in the scariest imaginable situation, you can get out of it okay.
It speaks to one of the themes we have on the podcast, which is entrepreneurship. Yep. I mean, the fact that you're just finished your freshman year at Yale, you're in the RCT program, effectively a one of one. So you're an entrepreneur at Yale, working with UConn, and then you're finding this Air Force, I guess, training opportunity basically that summer. Was there anyone kind of guiding you through that process?
So I had, our detachment commander, Mark DePrimo. He was great at kind of providing those opportunities, and he'd never tell you what to do, but he would give you suggestions. He'd be like, "Hey, there are some summer programs. Some of these are pretty rare. Some of these are pretty unique opportunities to do things that 19-year-olds don't get to do." Wow. And for me, the free fall one really caught my attention. There was a glider program as well, but I already had a private pilot's license by that point.
You pursued your private pilot's license, your VFR, when you were 14?
Yes, I started when I was 14. And I remember it was for some reason, extremely important to 16-year-old me to solo an airplane before I drove a car. This was the things that you get up for when you're that age, right? Your kids are there, so you're to see this. So I did. So I made
in a cockpit before driving a car.
So my parents drove me to the airport, and I soloed for the first time, because you can't solo till your 16th birthday, which is also when you can drive, right? So, so 16th birthday, I flew by myself for the first time, and then I drove my dad's Jeep home. So we made it just by minutes.
That's a pretty impressive day.
It's a big day.
Day in the life of a 16-year-old. Wow.
There aren't a lot of days I remember from 25 years ago, but that's one of them.
That's amazing. Okay, so you're flying the T6 at Del Rio.
Yep.
How long were you there? And then at what point did you go to weapons training, which I think might have been the next stop in your...
So way, way later. So Del Rio is where you learn how to fly planes in general. Okay. So T6 for about 7 months, and then you track select into either fighters or large airplanes or helicopters. So I transitioned to the T-38 that your dad flew, and that was the track to fighters and bombers. That was another 6 months, and then I down selected to the F-15E, which is the jet that I took to combat and went to weapons school in. And so that's an awesome airplane. You can look that one up. It's big. Has a lot of weapons, 2 people. So it gave me a lot of appreciation for coordination in combat. And we can tell stories about that later. And then got proficient enough at the F-15E to take it to war. So ended up in Afghanistan for Operation Enduring Freedom. And all of my combat time is in Afghanistan out of Bagram Air Base.
What year would that
have been 2009, 2010.
Okay. Those separate missions, or was that all one?
That was all one. Yeah.
Wow. And do you have any decision making in the process of aircraft type, or it is all?
You have goals. So you have a dream sheet that you put in.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it was my number one choice. It's absolutely the plane that I wanted to fly.
Fantastic.
It just looked like the one. I don't know why. Maybe it was the crew side of it. Maybe it was just the very offense driven mission that really appealed to me. Okay. Stealth was just coming out. So the F-22 had just come online. Amazing airplane. Not something you saw in pilot training drops, though. It was a transition aircraft that for people that had flown the F-15 before. Okay. And then later it became a droppable aircraft out of pilot training. Okay. So that would have certainly appealed to me. I won't pretend it wouldn't have. But at the time, the F-15, especially the conflicts that we were in, it was the workhorse. Wow. It was the one that was doing all the mission.
Now, after Del Rio, did you stop at Randolph at that point, or
Randolph was that's correct. Okay. So right after pilot training, you go through a course called Intro to Fighter Fundamentals. Okay. And that one is actually a washout course. It's all about seeing if you really want this. So you've earned your aircraft, and then for the next 3 months in San Antonio, they try to make you quit or wash you out. It is tough. It is a really tough course because you're playing defense the whole time.
Wow. Yep. So you may have your aircraft type already secured.
That's right.
But now you've got to get through the T-38 training.
Yes.
Wow. So my dad was a T-38 instructor at Randolph Air Force Base, but he would have been there in the late 70s, early 80s. So
he may have. I don't know if he would have been IFF or pilot training, to be honest with you, or PIT, which is the instructor of instructors. It could have been any of those.
Okay, we'll have to ask him.
Yes,
this
for sure.
afternoon. From there, were you there 2 years, 3 years? What was your total time?
So total time in pilot training until you're in an F-15 is about 2 years. So by 2007, I was at Seymour in North Carolina flying the F-15E.
Wow. Okay. Out of curiosity, how many bases have you touched in the U.S.?
A lot.
Or maybe even globally?
Globally, a lot. Hang on, I'd have to really think about this. Yeah, we're closing on 20. If we're talking like actually like being there long enough to not just be a visit,
Right.
it's probably around 20 bases. We've moved a lot. There was one point in my kid's life where we moved every year for 4 years.
Wow. That sounds like the career of someone in the oilfield services industry or the energy services industry more broadly. What's the fastest you've flown in an aircraft?
2.03, Mach 2.03.
Which,
So,
for those that aren't in the business,
2 times the speed of sound, roughly 1,600 miles an hour. And that was in an F-15E that we had stripped a lot of the parts off of.
wow.
It was awesome. It's like the way, it's just great.
Was that over the U.S.? Was that?
It was over
overseas?
the U.S.
Okay.
It was. In fact, it was, I've done it a couple times, and one was over Nevada, and one was over the ocean, the Gulf, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep.
I think my dad used to tell me that the fastest U.S. aircraft was at the SR-71 that
Yes.
has the records.
Yes.
And that goes...
3.6-ish.
Are they still active in the U.S. military?
Not
Air
that I
Force?
know of.
Okay.
I'm not going to pretend there's not possibly a program out there. But I've been surprised before by things that I was sure we retired that showed back up again.
Right.
So, but no, honestly, with everything I know in the Air Force, I don't think the SR-71 is flying.
Right.
They had a couple of variants like the Y-12 and the A-12, and I don't think those are flying either.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I think we've got more Thunderbirds movie fans here. There's probably some Top Gun fans as well.
Sure.
And in the sequel, Cruise is flying. I mean, that was an SR-71.
Yeah,
in that first scene.
it's technically that was the SR-72 Dark Star.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That he and I've seen it.
Really?
Okay, it's not real. I got to be careful. I'm
Spoiler
in
alert
uniform,
for-
right? So the SR-72 was conceptualized for the movie as a Mach 10 airplane.
Oh, wow.
And they actually brought it out to Edwards. I think Lockheed is the one that made it. It had Skunk Works logos on it, and it was just a mock-up.
Okay.
So this is not a real aircraft.
So it wasn't taxiing. It
Was
wasn't
not taxiing.
maneuvering.
It was sitting, and it was still really cool to look at. I mean, it looks just. I think it might have been the movie prop. In fact, I would certainly suspect that it was.
Okay.
Prior to some CGI edits, but no, it looks great. It looks great. When you're designing a new airplane, mission is really important.
Okay.
So sometimes you want to go Mach 10.
Yeah.
And sometimes you want to turn.
Right.
And those two things don't happen at the same time. So you have to choose, maneuverability, speed, ability to accelerate, decelerate. There's a lot of, there's a reason, for example, that the Air Force has 6 fighter types. Mm-hmm. It's not because we kept our old ones and made some new ones and you just can't let go. Mm-hmm. It's that they all have really different missions. And it's like a football team. You got to have all of them.
Which of those aircraft types is the big fighter workhorse? I mean, which is the one that...
Yeah, it's shifting, actually. So when I was new, it was the F-15E. And then you could argue that through all of modern history, the F-16 has been our multi-role fighter that we can pretty inexpensively throw at problems. Mm-hmm. And it's a very diverse airplane as well. But a lot of that from both sides is shifting into the F-35. So the F-35 was designed to be very modifiable. Okay. And it is extraordinarily good at changing. It updates very quickly. And it was one of the jets that I was testing when I was the 59th commander. And to see not just the rate of iteration improve, but also like the rate of iteration improve in a very short time is pretty inspiring to see what that jet's going to turn into.
And is that one that will be used by multiple armed forces branches?
Yes, already is.
Okay. So you finished pilot training at Randolph. Kind of what was next on the Air Force journey?
F-15 combat. That was my first combat squadron, 335th Fighter Squadron. We call ourselves the Chiefs. It's been around a long time. It was a great squadron. In fact, most of the mentors that kind of set me on the vector I ended up on were there in the Chiefs. A lot of them are still in the Air Force right now.
Wow.
Which is amazing because that was step one, right? That was your first combat unit. Very influential time in a young pilot's life. And so for me, besides the combat operations, which was the whole reason for being, you start to look at, okay, what do you want to do next? And there are two paths in the Air Force that you'll typically take if you're doing well. You know, in the fighter community, if you want to go to the next thing, right, chase the next dream, it would be either weapons school, which is it's a lot like the Top Gun movie. It's your 1%ers of the instructor cadre that compete to be selected to go to weapons school in Las Vegas, and then it's 6 months of very extreme training. The goal when you come out of weapons school is to be the best leader you can be, and to be the best instructor of instructors that you can be. So that's weapons school. And then the other path is the more academic of the two is test pilot school, where you go for a year to Edwards, fly 30 different things from blimps to helicopters to large, small, anything you can get your hands on. And that's a very engineering course where you learn about things like aeroservoelastic coupling. Weapons school is very much training. It's leadership, it's problem solving. It's the right now, and it's extreme memorization and knowledge of your airplane. Okay. And then test pilot school is much more education. It's broad. It's hey, we don't know what we're going to fly next. There was a period in my Air Force time when we thought we might acquire these like 600-foot long blimps. You know, that was a potential new radar concept. So somebody was going to have to learn how to fly that. And so test pilot school thinks like that, this universal concept of, I have no idea what's coming next, but you better know how to test it because you're the only one that can. So very, very different courses, very different paths. And the influences that you see in a fighter squadron are weapons officers, almost certainly. You never see a test pilot. They're typically at one of those isolated test bases. They don't often come back to the combat Air Force because they're off in the experimental world now. And so I was heavily influenced by weapons officers, even though if you had asked me coming into the Air Force, test pilot school or weapons school, I would have said, I've never heard of weapons school, but test pilot means astronaut, so I'm going to do that. Right. And so, and I had the education for it. And so I was surprised getting around the weapons officers, the weapons school grads in my first squadron, how incredible they were. And how much it kind of converted me towards, I think I should go to weapons school. You know, these guys are great leaders. They're great tacticians. They're smart, right? They may not have the educational background of aerospace engineer, but they sure knew their stuff. And that kind of excellence is contagious.
So Air Force values are integrity, service before self, and excellence in all we do. If you go to the fighter weapons school's values, which I think most of us look at as the premier leadership school in the Air Force, if not in the world. That's what the Navy calls Top Gun. Air Force Fighter Weapons School is this patch right here, 6 times longer than that. Significant ask on your time, like absolutely no breaks for 6 straight months. It's a great leadership course. And it has a motto that I think we can all get behind. And that motto is, be humble, be approachable, be credible.
I had an amazing commander. And this is honestly a turning point in my life. So Gipper Bunch was the commander of the Chiefs at the time. And, he asked me what he was supposed to ask me, which is, what do you want to do next? And I said what the book answer was, which is, I want to go to weapons school, sir. And he was like, what else? And I was like, I've never thought that far ahead. I've been told that I had one answer and I gave it to you. So, and he was like, you should consider both. And so he and his boss, which was the group commander, Jack Ruby, both sat me down and were like, hey, you have the education for test pilot school. You have an astronaut goal. You are a great instructor. You could make it to weapons school. It's like, why don't you try to do both? I was like, well, I don't think that's possible. And they were like, it's not supposed to be, but let's try. So they vectored me to Nellis as an assignment. So not to go to weapons school, but as an assignment to do operational test, which was kind of the beginning of learning flight test. And I applied for weapons school right out of my first squadron. I got in, which made it early enough that I could actually then finish a full weapons school assignment, and then still apply to test pilot school.
Wow.
And so I was able to do both, but only because of their leadership. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Those are amazing people.
That's
to
incredible.
take the time to deviate from the book answer. And I mean, really, you're not supposed to be able to do that.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
What an amazing experience, but what a great story in terms of having those mentors that potentially could help guide you in some of the key decisions. And I know in the past you've talked about kind of the plan. Maybe just, obviously Air Force flying was sort of part of that plan, but at what point kind of were you putting that plan in place?
I mean, we were there. By that point in the story, knowing what my goal was, which was to become an astronaut, I felt pretty good about the path I was on. You fast forward to 2015, I had graduated from both. I was there had only been probably 3 people who had done that before.
Wow.
In the past, and it was awesome. I understood the tactical side of things. I understood the leadership side of things, and I understood the technical side of things. And I was an experimental test pilot at Eglin, which is Destin, Florida, flying F-15Cs, F-15Es, and then this new thing called the F-15 Advanced, which ends up being the EX that we just put into play a couple of years ago.
Great.
So it was awesome. It was a great time to be alive, right? Like I thought things were in reach at that point. And that was the first time I applied to the astronaut corps, was 2016, 17. So just background for everybody. Astronauts take applications every 4 years. And it's about a 2-year process, 1.5 to 2 years. So they down select you from in that board, there were 18,000 applicants. And then they chop you down to qualified and then highly qualified. And this goes on for months. You don't know that that's going on until you get your first call. And that first call, they bring you in for interviews here in Houston. And that's about 120 people. So that's a big chop to get down to interview round 1. And then if you make it through that, it's very quiet for a while. Then you hear about interview round 2, and that's down to 40 to 50.
Wow.
And so that's where I was in 2017. So I was a finalist on that board in 2017. And it was an unbelievable experience. In fact, I know a lot of the astronauts now because of that board. They are the best of humanity. They are really incredible people. Everything about the process was top notch. In fact, I used a lot of it later on the Thunderbirds to build an interview process that would really put people through it. Because it's not easy.
Right.
And I didn't make it on that one, but I was a finalist and I was young. And I knew that I had my main shot 4 years later when I would be a graduated squadron commander and be right at that like 37, 38-year-old point with experience. Because that first astronaut board, I was young, but I was also a brand new test pilot. So the credentials weren't there, right? It was early in my test life.
And that was the phase before you took over the 59th.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So maybe give us a quick window into that experience.
Yeah, sure. So I left Eglin, didn't make astronaut, no problem. It was a great experience anyway. Went on to actually Office of Secretary of Defense Policy at the time.
Wow.
Worked on regional policy for a while because this is the Air Force broadens you as you grow up. They're not going to let you do one thing forever. They're going to keep expanding that horizon. So quick policy tour, and then I took command of the 59th. And I was flying F-35s at the time, so I had changed airplanes. New jet, spent about 3-4 years in the F-35, but the squadron I was in charge of, it's so unique. It was such a great experience. I had all 6 fighter types in one squadron.
Wow.
Now, just understand how rare that is. If you take Seymour in North Carolina, the base, right? The whole base is 4 F-15E squadrons, 18 each. So you're talking about when you include the spares, 96 F-15s on one base.
Wow.
But that squadron was ridiculous. And it was responsible for operational tests, so effectiveness and suitability for those platforms. And you can imagine the management problem of every week we had a new configuration in those airplanes. Every week we had a new thing to look at, to evaluate. And so you have this constant churn, constant software updates, and the squadron was a mile wide and an inch deep, right? I had my arms wrapped around this monster test problem, which is where I really learned to just trust the people below me.
Every leader encounters a different environment. a different macro sphere of influence from around them. You can ask yourself, for those of you who've been in leadership positions, how many times have you come into a position with these great plans only to encounter a new environment, a new war, in our case, that completely shifts our vector, and just a new economic reality. You never really know what you're going to run into when you take command of a squadron. So I think it's really important up front not to judge those who came before you and understand that the environment that they were in was probably pretty different from yours.
So because I had my arms wrapped around 6 different fighter types, I started to see trends in the way we were doing tests in the Air Force that were a little bit of the old way of doing things. And what I meant by that is we would typically make a change in an airplane, and then we would isolate that, which is logical, isolate variables. We would test it rigorously in a single environment, and we would sometimes do that for years before we would iterate. And then we would say, okay, I believe I have found all the problems. I will now field it, and it goes to the Combat Air Force where you have a second lieutenant flying it. And what I was noticing, especially as we had transitioned towards software updates, is that no matter how rigorously we tested in one environment, as soon as the lieutenant got their hands on it, they would find problems that we didn't know were there.
Wow.
It's like, okay, this isn't working. How do we think about this differently? And actually the inspiration was kind of in my pocket the whole time, right? If you look at the way software testing is done for your iPhone, for Microsoft, right? They just field it.
Right.
And then they constantly iterate on the data pool that comes back from fielded forces, i.e. you and me.
Right.
We had to get towards that. And so we developed a concept called crowdsourced flight test, which was very high data rate solid state recorders on the aircraft that were constantly pulling raw data. No filter, just pull it all out. And then the other critical component of crowdsourced flight test was edge computing. So what wouldn't work is I send a bunch of F-35s to Afghanistan, and I'm going to use the network of Afghanistan to route the data back to Nellis, to process it, to make conclusions, and then send out solutions, right? Sending it all back home wasn't going to work. We needed compute power out there.
Wow.
So we would bring with us these knowledge management server racks, and it would do the processing there and then send question and answers back.
Fascinating.
So that we could query data from afar to pull all that information. And there's some risk in it, right? We're still not there because you're always balancing in the flying world safety versus efficiency. Always. Whether you're talking about, I could make entire airplanes out of titanium. That would be a little bit safer.
Yep.
That's very expensive and very heavy. And then, likewise, how much testing is enough for a lieutenant? Right? You have these squadrons that are very professional, dedicated experts that are going to probably be able to get themselves out of a bad situation. And then you have someone who's got 3 hours in the aircraft who is probably not going to be able to get themselves out of a bad situation. Where's the balance of field the new thing now and take enormous risk that young man or woman puts themselves in a bad situation that you didn't find, or test for 10 years to make sure they never have a problem? Well, both are wrong, right? Then the answer lies somewhere in between, and I think our enterprise is constantly looking at where to go next.
Would you say that software and technology effort leads into AI, artificial intelligence, general intelligence? I
think it does. And at the time, AI was a idea. This was not that long ago, and I think that's important to the story. We're talking about 2021 here.
Right.
And so even back in 2021, we were still talking about manual processing. When people said AI to me, typically what that meant was a PowerPoint about AI. That meant Excel.
Those are tools all of our listeners will know well.
So, I say that tongue in cheek, but it's true. I mean, I can't tell you how many things were as a test squadron. We got pitched a lot, and man, a lot of AI pitches, and not a single one of them was AI.
Well, it's great to hear that the Air Force and Astro, you're bringing the armed force, into that sphere. It's something that we as investors and business builders are constantly being bombarded with business plans, with software opportunities, all those things. So it's good to hear that you're seeing the same trends and maybe having to defend against some of those trends that we are as well.
We're a big buyer.
Well, I think taking it for more of a math-minded person and thinking about kind of dollars and cents. thinking about the 59th Squadron or maybe the Thunderbirds, you're talking about, it sounds like about $100 million individual aircraft.
Yep.
And maybe up to 100 aircraft.
Yep.
I mean, under your command, you do that math, it's a $10 billion asset base.
Yeah, I think
we
looked at at one point, our fleet, just the fleet of aircraft was $5.1 billion back then when I was in command of it.
That's amazing.
It's a lot.
That's a pretty serious responsibility,
Yes.
independent of all the people and lives. And
Yep.
and what were those numbers in terms of people that were under your command?
The 59th is a big squadron. It's close to 200 when you bring in the civilians and contractors. As far as active duty military, it was much smaller in the 40 range. But yeah, big squadron, and everybody was busy. You know, nobody was sitting around in that one.
Fast forward us to the point where you're now applying for the astronauts a second time.
Okay.
And you get a call.
So you may know this story. At that point, the plan, if there was one, you can never really have a plan, but if I had a plan, it was to finish the 59th, which was kind of my dream squadron, and then go on to the NASA board that was happening at the same time and wrap up and, leave the Air Force having commanded a squadron and go to space. And I get a call from a friend of mine who we had actually done operational tests together, a few squadrons ago, named Brick Caldwell. Brick is an unbelievably amazing person, and that's important, right? Because had he not been him, I would have treated that call differently. Even with Brick being Brick, someone I really look up to. This was mid-pandemic while all this is going on, also, by the way. And so Brick called me and he was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about the possibility of you taking over this team." He was Thunderbird 1, right down the street, by the way. We're just two buildings away. And I hadn't thought about it once. Not once. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, right, looking back, but not once, because I had a path, and it did not involve demonstration. And so when Brick asked me to take over the Thunderbirds, here's what went through my mind. I was like, well, I've already been a squadron commander. That's a second squadron command. I've got a plan. I don't know anything about F-16s. I don't know anything about air demonstration. I'm probably not the right guy. And I believe the way that came across was absolutely not. So, to Brick's credit, he didn't try to sell it at all. He just asked me to come take a look. So I went down and observed what that team was doing. And what I saw was a unbelievable reform going on. Brick had inherited a pretty rough era. When Brick took over in 2019, they had just had a commander leader fired. They had just lost Cajun, and they had had two other total loss of aircraft crashes within a very short span.
Wow.
So you had a squadron that was actually kind of afraid, spread out the formations, and it was not pushing. It was sustaining. It was trying to survive. And Brick had this concept that you don't turn that around by comforting and making things easier. You turn it around by making everything harder, which is what he had started doing. So we're talking significant changes, loss of weekends, huge increases in training, huge increases in this sense of purpose of, you got to believe in what you're doing, to the point that you're not asking for time off, to the point that you are debriefing details that the crowd will never be able to see. This absolute dedication to excellence and human achievement. That's what he was all about. And he had started this reform. He had started putting this thing in place, but he was running out of time. And the environment is what it is. 2020 for them was a lost season. They only flew about 8 air shows that season. Wow. So he had time to really think about this. He rewrote the show entirely. He was able to retain his team, through that pandemic era. So they had an extra year. And he got that team to a point of unbelievable performance. But this is where it gets interesting. The prevailing view of leadership at the time was, okay, yeah, sure, but that's a bunch of 3-year guys that had a year to practice. Okay. Right. So it's cool that you can do something extraordinary, but is it sustainable? And that was kind of the mission he put on me, was now figure out how to do this with a normal season, right? Where you've got a few months to train, and see if you can get further. Not just sustain this level, but take it further. And he had a bunch of ideas that he didn't have time to execute that he kind of handed to me, and then he wanted me to take over and go with it. But I can't say this enough. These were his ideas. This is it. When you talk about a shaping leader, someone who comes into an organization that is willing to break glass. Sometimes you need that person, and it has to be the right personality. And you have to have so much courage that you are not worried about the implications to your career, to anything else. And that was Brick. So he came in and broke glass and put a lot of authorities in place to basically say, all right, you're free. It's yours. Figure it out.
Wow. That's amazing.
So when I saw that,
yeah,
it was a pivotal shift in my life. To be asked to do something that, in his opinion, was sort of custom made for what the Air Force had trained me to do. I couldn't say no. Sticking with the NASA board at that point felt like a selfish path versus something that the enterprise that had trained me to the point that I was eligible for astronaut in the first place had asked me to do. And it wasn't just Brick. By the time we got to the interview phase, I actually had both going on at the same time at one point, because you don't just get the Thunderbirds job. You do have to go through the flight evals and the interview process and all that stuff, even if you're asked. And General Mark Kelly, who you see in the movie, he was passionate about reforming this team as well. He wanted it fixed. So was his predecessor, General Holmes. And they were empowering, very empowering 4-stars for both Brick and for me. Wow. And when I interviewed with General Kelly for the team, because it's a 4-star selection, by the way, it's not it's not small. It's not a small stress moment, by the way, as you can imagine. So General Kelly, his interview, he didn't ask me a lot of questions. I think maybe none. We'll get to one later, but he was very one way, very directive, and he just told stories, and they were really impacting stories. And one of them was about the definition of elite teams. In his mind, an elite team does not conform to societal norms. An elite team plants a flag and states its identity and says, you join us. If you join us, you're going to be a part of this team. Here is our cultural identity. He had studied this rigorously. And one of the elite teams he studied was the Rangers. And he talked about when you finish Ranger school, you've just crawled through the mud, it's 13-mile ruck, you're dying, and there's a big flag across the top that says, remember, you joined us. And that was his vision of elite teams. And what he was trying to tell me, without saying, go do this, he was saying, the Thunderbirds need to be that.
Right.
So he gave me a lot to think about.
That's fascinating.
And so when you have two people of that caliber, Brick and General Kelly, ask without asking, right? It tends to lead you to making some pretty tough life decisions. So in this case, I was at the interview round for NASA again. So so it wasn't the final round; it was the first round. And at that point, it felt wrong to continue down that path and spend Air Force resources and NASA resources simultaneously, because those two start points were the exact same day. It turns out the selection, for the astronauts from 2021, was December 6th, and that was my change of command into the Thunderbirds. And you can kind of imagine a situation where I'm on the stage, taking the flag, okay, I'm now the Thunderbird commander. Just kidding. I'm going to Houston to find somebody else, right? That not possible,
Right.
Absolutely not okay for either enterprise. And so it was the hardest thing I ever did, but I withdrew from that board.
Wow. Well, the Thunderbirds were so fortunate to get a chance to have you join, and Brick in particular, for identifying you and really putting you in that position of leadership. This whole podcast will probably be a commercial break for Air Force Elite Thunderbirds. I think I've seen it now twice. And maybe just kind of walk us through what it was like to join the Thunderbirds, kind of that first introduction to the team. At some point, you're probably taking on a blended team, some new pilots, some existing pilots. How did you take what, kind of Brick's architecture and really take it to your own?
Yeah, Brick had put in place the scaffolding for an extraordinary team, and it had proven that it was possible. And so I didn't have to change much. What I thought we needed to do, and where I really focused, especially in those early years, was generating a sustainable sense of purpose. Back then, even with the reforms that Brick had put in place, when I asked most Thunderbird pilots, what are we all about? what's the purpose here? They would say recruit, retain, and inspire. Still a team's motto. There's nothing wrong with that. Recruit, retain, and inspire, right? Well, recruiting to me has never been something that can give you a sense of purpose. It's good. You have to, every organization has to recruit. I have always believed that you recruit by being extraordinary, though. So we weren't far off. The team under Brick, the team was driving for extraordinary every day.
Wow.
But they were doing it for themselves, which is important, right? It was, hey, I see you. I know you were out of position. I know the crowd can't tell, but we're going to do this, right? We're going to get better together. So that culture was there. And it was amazing how fast he was able to turn it into that, by the way.
Okay.
So that culture was there. But we needed a why. We needed something to believe in, so that it would last longer than our command tours, right, as we were moving forward. So fascinating when you look at history that purpose has actually been there all along. And I'll talk about this a little bit more today, but when you dig into history, here's what you see. The first demonstration team in the U.S. was not the Thunderbirds. It was actually the Blue Angels, and it was back in 46.
Okay.
And there's a very good reason for that. Because in 1947, this new thing called the Air Force was about to happen. And if you remember, like, it was Army Air Corps it was Navy. And then we were going to consolidate under Department of Defense in 1947 into an Air Force.
Wow.
Well, the Navy, if you can imagine, you're a Navy pilot, what you're afraid of is losing your aviation wing. And you can understand how much of a threat that was for those guys. So the Blue Angels were created to recruit for the Navy. You have big, giant gold letters. Their paint scheme hasn't changed, right? They're dark blue. They are Navy colors. It says U.S. Navy in massive letters on the bottom of the wings.
Wow.
They are there to identify and sustain the need for naval aviation.
Wow.
So to me, that's a recruiting goal. And that's an important one and a really specific one. So why the Thunderbirds then? So 53.
Okay.
So now we're talking 7 years later. The U.S. makes demonstration team 2, and it's the Thunderbirds. And if you look at the history, we were in the middle of the Korean War. It was a pretty divided time. Jets were new. Propellers, people believed in propellers. They didn't really believe in these new jet things.
Right.
And so the Thunderbirds were created to bring people together in divided times and to build faith in our institutions, which is why they're red, white, and blue. And they have been since day one. So if you look, we are not Air Force colors. Right. Air Force colors are blue and silver. Thunderbirds are red, white, and blue. So it had a more national objective to me when I looked at that history. And I really emphasized that with the team. Like, we are red, white, and blue. We are America's team. And by the way, the pandemic has just split our country in half. You have a battle of two rights, which are the hard ones. Right? It is right to defend individual liberties and decision. It is right to defend the weak and old. Right? So you have this battle of two rights that had torn the country in half, and we all watched it happen. And so when I looked at the Thunderbirds' mission in that time, that was a really easy sell for the team. Was, hey, we are here to be a beacon of excellence in the name of service to something bigger than ourselves. That brings people together. And so to do that, we had to be extraordinary.
And so we changed just about everything, and we made it harder. So we added flight evaluations to our hiring process. Those were actually character evaluations in disguise. We set up our flight evaluations to make it completely impossible. So we had our new recruits fly loops and rolls on my wing, and then a delta burst and a bonton roll, which are maneuvers that you definitely cannot do. In fact, a lot of them hadn't even flown the F-16 before when we brought them through these flight evals. And so we're doing that to see how you react to failure, to see who you are inside. Are you the kind of person that fights through your boundaries and tries to kill yourself because being on the team is that important to you? Or are you the kind of person that's like, nope, no thanks, I'll stay out here? We don't want either of those. We want somebody who's aware of their boundaries, but who has the character to understand themselves and is able to debrief and continue to push towards perfection. And that's what we were looking for. So we added those flight evals. Believe it or not, they were not there. We increased our flight rate by 68%. We doubled our training. We flew 2 to 3 times a day, no weekends, no breaks. You had Wednesday off between shows sometimes. A lot of times we chained the shows together. And oh, by the way, during winter training, which used to be at home, we deployed. So we took the team on the road for 2 weeks to New Mexico, 2 weeks to Edwards, California, and then joined the Blue Angels in El Centro, California for some combined training. That took people out of their homes for another 45 days on a season that already takes you away from your home for about 270 days.
I think the movie really does an amazing job of presenting you and the rest of the team as, all-star athletes. I mean, you think about the experience that you built into the training program. I mean, that sounds incredibly demanding. But maybe talk about the physical elements as well as the intellectual elements.
Yeah. The physical elements of fighter aviation in general are covered so well by Top Gun Maverick that they need no elaboration. It's there. You know, you're always under some G-force. You're always being stressed out physically in an airplane. You're being stressed out mentally in an airplane too. By the time you get to the Thunderbirds, so all of us are combat pilots. The youngest people on the team have been in for about 10 years in a jet. The oldest one, that would be me, about 20 years.
Wow.
You know, you have to be a graduated squadron commander to lead the team. Not young pilots. They've been taught things like cross-check, right? And so how do you survive in a fighter jet that's going 600 miles an hour? Well, you have a deliberate cross-check. It is outside, 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 inside, outside, 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 radar, outside, right? So you build this cross-check-ins. I think this is well known. No one can actually multitask. That's impossible.
Yeah.
The way you look like you can multitask is that you have a deliberate cross-check. So a lot of that stuff that would blow somebody's mind if I threw you into an F-16 right now, those Thunderbird pilots are very experienced at. They're good at that. I don't have to teach that. What I have to teach is this completely new concept of killing off your survival instinct and putting yourself well inside of your boundaries. So my number 4, when I took over the team, Strobe said this so well in an interview question that I have never forgotten it. He asked one of the applicants, he said, do you have the discipline to stare at something for 45 minutes? Just stare, like pick a point and stare at it for 45 minutes. And he's like, and if you take your eye off of it, you die. And I was like,
small ramification.
That probably got some people's attention, right? And so when you talk about the physical side of the Thunderbirds, you can't separate that G-force from the mental task of staring at, it's not even just, if you look at the bottom of a Thunderbird jet, you've got the blue feathers on the wings, and you count those feathers to know your position. That's not good enough at some point. It gets so refined that our maintainers actually put stickers underneath. We call it Gerber, like baby food. So we'll put stickers underneath my wing that are pretty small, and they'll move in as the team gets more and more mature.
Interesting.
And so they are staring at a bolt, like something this big, like this. Unable to see me, unable to see the guy next to them, completely oblivious to the world around them. We're upside down. We're going through rolls and loops. We're 100 feet off the ground, and they have no idea. They are staring at that Gerber and maintaining that position with everything they've got. And on top of that, just because you asked about the physical side, Thunderbird aircraft, we trim all the way down. So we are... If I let go of the stick, it's negative 1.5 G dive. That's what the jet would do. So it would throw you up against the cockpit at 1.5 times the force of gravity. Wow. So we are fighting that the whole time to pull to a neutral point, and that's the baseline. So that 25 to 40 pounds of force, depending on how far you click that nose down, that is on your arm for 45 minutes. So there's really good reasons for it. If you look back at history, every time the Thunderbirds got a new aircraft, the contractor who built the aircraft would say, it's a magic airplane. You don't have to do that anymore. That's dumb. You're good now. Well, guess what? The demo just gets destroyed and no one can fly it. And they're like, what's wrong with this airplane? And then someone from the alumni is like, hey, you should probably trim full forward. And it works every time.
Wow.
It's funny how tradecraft works like that. The last podcast I listened to talked a lot about chip manufacturing. It's a great example. You can have all the education and technology in the world, but tradecraft is extremely important, and you can't shortcut tradecraft. You have to learn it, and it has to be built into the institution. Our trim full forward is a really good example of that. That's 70 years of institutional learning that has taught us that this is the only way to do that. Now, applying the test pilot side of my life to this, I can give you some pretty good reasons for why it works. It takes you out of the dead band in the flight controls so that you are already starting from a very linear flight control band. It tenses up all the muscles and ligaments in your arms so that you have no free play in your skeletal system. And it takes you out of boundary avoidance. So you're not pushing and pulling, you are just pulling. So you are always pulling towards your target, never trying to dance around it. So I can give you education reasons behind it.
Right.
But what's fascinating to me is the institution learned that on their own. I guarantee you no one back in 1953 was like, boundary avoidance theory, guys. We need to trim out of that neutral band and avoid those boundaries. That didn't come about till probably 2012. Right? But it's funny how people, when you repeat something over and over again, you kind of converge on a solution.
Yeah,
and it was so cool to see the education side and the tradecraft side marry up.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. Astro, maybe talk through, some of your biggest leadership learnings from the Thunderbirds, maybe even from the 59th. What are some of the things that you really pulled out of that experience?
I talked about my college experience with the amount you can do when you're doing more. And over again, I relearned that. When I looked at the Thunderbirds' schedule as the 59th commander, I would have told you it's impossible. Here's a day in the life. So you wake up on a Thursday, you lead an 8-ship of airplanes across the country to a non-Air Force base, Chicago, New York, something usually out east. You lose 3 hours coming from Nellis, air refueling the whole way. Your C-17 full of people packs up all the logistics that come with moving your entire squadron, takes off. You're coordinating that whole move. You land in a new location. You conduct a site survey. You see it for the first time. You get out of the airplanes, go to sleep, wake up the next day, and that's your only practice day. You do 2 flights over that airfield, memorize everything within a 5-mile ring because this show is flown completely visually. In the meantime, your squadron is unpacking, building its world, engine swaps, like big maintenance movements without the back shop, right? Without the Air Force infrastructure, all on open ramp. And then the next day you get up and you do, typically for Thunderbird 1, you'll do what's called a FARCL, which is friends and relatives, kin, loved ones, and everyone else. One of my favorite things we do on this team, we will pick somebody from that town that's on the team, bring their parents over to an airplane, and I will meet with them in the morning and memorize their entire life. I'll meet with them for about an hour and a half, get it all internalized, and then I will go and talk about them in front of their parents as if we're best friends. And explain everything that that they do on the team and how they got here, and just to tell their story to their own family, which is a tough audience to do that, by the way, because they know
they're pretty well versed.
If you mess up their names, so you'll do that, and then you'll sometimes I would meet with an ambassador from another country who is there tied to that state, and so you have this full day, and then on top of that, you go and fly the demonstration, which is hard every time. Sometimes with bad weather, sometimes with contingencies, with the airfield and logistics, and you fight through all these contingencies, and then you go give a speech in town, and then you finally get to go to bed. Okay. You do that twice, and then wake up Monday and fly back to Nellis, redeploy, do it all over again. Wow. All right, so it's impossible. When you look at it from the outside, it's impossible. But you ask for leadership lessons, and it's that once you immerse yourself in a pace that insane, somehow you can do it. Wow. And then somehow your capacity opens up and you can think while doing it. And then somehow your capacity opens up and you can actually write and codify what you've done while you're doing it. I don't understand how our brains work, but that is a huge lesson for me because I have seen this repeated enough, and it's such a consistent problem where organizations go through waves. All of them do. They go through cultural waves. And there is always this temptation when you're coming off of a crest to lower the bar, catalyzed by something. Maybe I'm not getting enough recruiting numbers. Maybe I'm not getting enough applicants. Maybe people are tired. And the temptation over and over again is to go, okay, all right, then I'll lower the bar, right? Okay, that education requirement no longer required. Or I can accept a slightly lower number of hours or a slightly lesser experience. And we go through this and we think, if I just lower the bar a little bit, then I'll have enough people enthusiastic and happy with the reduction in training to continue on. It doesn't work. It has the opposite effect. In fact, catastrophically, I found, because at some point you've lowered the bar so much that you're not desirable anymore. Because when you go back to what we talked about earlier, why fly extremely close. It's not just because it's safer, it's because it's incredible. And when you see it from the ground, you may not know why it's incredible, but you can feel that that is something extraordinary in the lens of human achievement, and that makes you want to be a part of it. When it looks achievable, nobody wants to do it. And we've learned that lesson over and over through the waves. And this isn't just the Thunderbirds. The weapons school's been through this, test pilot school's been through any elite institution. I firmly believe that you draw people to those institutions by being extraordinary, not by making it easy and not by making it something that you have to ask someone to join. You should never have to ask someone to join an elite institution. It should just be impossible, and that'll make people want to be a part of it.
That makes sense.
That's probably my biggest leadership lesson.
When I asked the Thunderbirds, what is our squadron's purpose? What are we there for? Can anyone guess what their answer was? I heard it a few times today. It's okay, you don't have to shout it out there. Recruiting. The team would tell you recruit, retain, and inspire in that order. It's exactly the wrong order. All right, recruiting motivates exactly nobody. All right, yes, we have to do that. That's important. But I firmly believe you recruit by being extraordinary, not by going and telling people that they should join your team. It's quite the opposite. You should tell them it's impossible to join your team and be extraordinary, and then people will want to join your team.
Watching, especially the whole certification process you guys had to get ready for that big day with General Kelly, and seeing Primo go through that, some of those experiences, and I guess the bomb burst is sort of one of the culminating events as part of the air show. Maybe just talk a little bit about that experience and how you guys were able to get to certification.
Yeah. So the first thing I think is important to say is that I think Primo is probably the best right wing man in the history of the team. Wow. He is a really good pilot, and because you have a 90-minute movie that's supposed to capture years, right? we had to pick a maneuver that showed how hard it is. The high bomb burst did that very well. It's important to realize there are 40 maneuvers in that show, right? So, we were able to show one in great detail. And what was left out was the fact that, by the way, the other 39, like Primo was best ever, absolutely crushing it, right? And so, there was never a point when I was like, Primo may not make it. It was quite the opposite. It was like, man, if I can get this last one down,
right,
we are going to be absolutely unprecedented good.
That's awesome.
And that was really what was going on. And I think there's a lesson in that too. You can never afford to say we're good enough. I think that applies across any leadership situation. You can never say we're good enough. You have to keep finding the next thing. So that high bomb burst was going to be perfect. And once it was perfect, then we got even closer. And then we tightened up the ranges that we went out to, and awesome. We made it a shorter, quicker maneuver, right? So you're always looking for the way to improve, because if you keep people in that offensive mindset, we're very happy there. You've probably noticed this too. People are very happy when they have something they're striving towards. People are very unhappy when they're defending something they feel like they've earned.
I want you to kind of picture, for those of you who run at all, the difference in when someone's in front of you and you feel like you're closing that gap and you're running past somebody. Feel that psychology. Now flip it around and feel someone's footsteps coming up behind you and you're trying to defend your lead. Terrible feeling, right? So that's just the physical side of it. It's really the same everywhere. I find that when people are charging towards a goal, they're very happy and are happy to keep doing that almost forever. It's when you crest that culture wave and you start trying to defend what you think you've earned that all of the bad elements of our mind start to kick in. You start to get entitlement. You start to think about things like, how can I kick people off of this ladder that are climbing behind me instead of just continuing to climb ahead? All the negative parts of our human psychology come in when we think we've earned something, we turn around and start playing defense. This is so pervasive in our way of thinking that the test pilot school has a theory called boundary avoidance theory that really defines this for me. And I'm gonna tell you this theory. It's about airplanes, okay? But I really think it applies to everything we do. So the idea is, if I point you towards a target and I say, go fly to that point, that's actually very easy to do. We're really good at that. We can aim at that target, stare at it, and fly there. If, on the other hand, I give you the exact same mission, but I say, there are 2 walls you are not allowed to hit, go that way and do not hit a wall. What happens in airplanes, and you could even do this with your car, please don't, But you can make yourself do this. You will do what's called a pilot-induced oscillation every single time. So you'll try to avoid boundary 1, you'll amplify your move away from boundary 2, and you will continue to amplify those movements until you hit a wall. 100% it's gonna happen. And the only way to get through that is to go, forget the walls, I'm pointing straight at the target. Sir, you flew for a long time, am I lying? It's true, right? So pilot-induced oscillations are a real thing, and we credit them to what we call boundary avoidance theory. Humans are terrible at avoiding boundaries. We are excellent at pointing at targets. And I allocate that to the same philosophy as we are really happy to play offense because we're pointing at a target, and we are terrible at defending what we have.
You're kicking people off, right? Those are the behaviors that come out when you start playing defense, and you can never allow a team to be there. As a leader, I think it's your job, in fact, to manufacture a challenge if you have to keep people at an offensive mindset. And so for us, it was easy. We always had a goal, always had something that we were trying to improve further. So when you look at the high mom burst in the movie, we were trying to make it perfect. We were trying to make that rejoin at show center, on the dot, straight into the Thunderbird pitch. And when you're pushing like that, you're going to see some pretty extraordinary misses, which Netflix was able to capitalize on, and I'm very glad. I'm very glad they did, because it is that hard. And some of the trauma that Primo would have gone through trying to get, everybody has a thing.
Right.
Everybody has one maneuver that they're just like, why won't you do it? I know you're capable and you can do harder things, but you can't do this one thing. So that rejoin for him, and it stuck with him for a while.
Yeah.
And I had Threat was the best instructor. I knew she was going to get him there.
Yeah.
I knew she was going to get him there. There was never, honestly, there was never a point where I was like, we're not going to start.
Wow.
It was just, we just wanted to be truly, truly above precedent.
Well, what I think, what was really exciting is to see each of the different, individuals, their contributions to the team. You talk about Threat. There was the other gentleman that was mentoring one of the pilots, Thunder. But just each person that brought something to the team. And I thought that kind of team dynamic was so valuable to see.
Yeah. It's, I remember one of the first things that I said when we swapped over to Team 23. So again, 50% changeover. Okay. I had half a Bricks team my first year. My second year, I had a new team. I remember saying this at the briefing table. As I looked around and they were debriefing our first sortie. And I just remember saying, our colors are different. And I did not mean our skin colors, by the way, just to be clear. Our colors are different. And personalities, right? If you could colorize personality, right? Sure. You could see that this was a different dynamic. I know this seems ethereal, but I could just, they were just different. It was a different group of personalities, a different group of characters. And every leadership situation is a customized situation. Okay. Even Thunderbird 1, year 1 to year 2 was a different situation. Right? I had different colors in the room, and I had to shape that into the right team. People are motivated by different things. So, yeah, I have no elaboration on this concept, but I'm convinced it's a thing. You could probably look around a boardroom when you change people out and go, the colors are different. Yeah, I've got to lead differently here.
Anything else on the movie that you wanted to share, and then wanted to go into life after the Thunderbirds?
Yeah, I can say I'm very unbelievably impressed by what Blue Ox and Netflix produced. And I don't know that was always going to be there. One of the things that Brick told me when we were interviewing for the team is he would ask everybody joining the team, how are you going to make the Thunderbirds a household name? I still remember that in his voice. How are you going to make the Thunderbirds a household name? And I was like, I fly well, I guess. Well, when this movie opportunity came about, I was like, absolutely, that's it. That's how you make the Thunderbirds a household name, is you show the authenticity behind it. Because authenticity unites. What doesn't unite is we're perfect people, and look how great we are at what we do, and this is easy. You're just not good enough. Right? That is the exact wrong message to give to the American population. Because it's true. It's hard every day. Every day was the hardest day of my life for 2 years. Wow. And we needed to find a way to show that, because that builds trust and faith in the institution, I think. You know, I can't tell you what people's reactions were to the movie. That's an individual decision. What I can tell you is it was very authentic. When I watch it, that is exactly what happened. I'm there. Even the family scenes, the challenges that with dad being gone 30 days in a row and back for one Wednesday when they have school and then back on the road again, like it still hits me watching Revan and Declan in that movie. So the authenticity is something I'm just very thankful for. I think that movie could have gone a lot of different directions, and the producers, in my opinion, could not have done a better job of capturing what that team is about. It's a giving team. It's not there for its own glory. It's there to bring people together in America's name.
You know, watching the movie a first time and then a second time, I was talking to our team about it, and I also said that it was as much about Astro and you as much as it was about the Thunderbirds itself. And I think hearing about your story and all the things that you've accomplished in your career and all the challenges you've taken and how you've been able to balance everything is just really impressive.
Well, thanks, Charlie. I played a small, unassuming role. No, happy to have been a part of it.
Well, catching up earlier, I think each of us, probably safe to say this, we probably married up in our respective marriages. You met your wife at Yale. Would love to hear more about, your family side. I met my wife at work and then at business school, at Harvard Business School. But maybe tell us more about your wife and kids and how everyone's doing.
Victoria she is unbelievable. We met at Yale. She was a poli-sci major. I was an engineer. We had one overlapping class called Computers and the Law. So where the two things meet. Learned a lot from that class, actually. But mostly I learned that Victoria is smarter than me. That was the biggest takeaway. When we graduated, we were 1 year apart. I went into the Air Force. That was preordained. That was happening. By the time I met her, I'd finished up ROTC and off we went. And I didn't meet her until senior year. So it was a pretty short dating span. So Victoria went government as well. She became a diplomat, foreign service officer. She is also a extraordinary violinist. She played in the Las Vegas Philharmonic. She's that good. And she did that on the side while she was there for my assignment. So when Victoria and I got married in 2009, we got married about a month after engagement and about 2 days before I went to Afghanistan.
Oh my gosh.
So it's just kind of this happens a lot in the military, Charlie. I know this sounds weird, but you get engaged and then the deployment comes around and you're like, well, it's not tryouts. I gotta decide right now. So you get married and here we are 15 years later. Life's good. So she has put up with a lot with my career, especially considering how capable she is. And for a long time, we got married and we kind of had an agreement that, hey, for the next 5 years, we're going full throttle. And that may be in different directions, but we're going to see how this all plays out because you don't know how those careers are going to go. And so, unfortunately, both of us did pretty well. So we didn't actually live in the same house until it was kid time. Okay. And then we knew, okay, so now for sure, we're going to have to move and I have no say in where I go. So we're going to have to move with the Air Force, kind of like your childhood growing up. So when Revan came along, Victoria finally stopped working for the State Department and she's been working threat intelligence ever since. She's very good at it. She's able to maintain actually a telework position, which is awesome. She still plays violin a lot. In fact, she just 2 nights ago, played a show with a whole bunch of A-listers. She's really the reason I talk about her is because I can see her in the boys. So Revan and Declan have both picked up Victoria's musical abilities, also her face. So they look like Victoria. They play music like Victoria. They are brilliant little boys. And in fact, now I'm converted. So if you ask what I get up for these days, it's playing music with the boys.
That's awesome.
I love it. And they are so much more talented than I will ever be. But they let me play in the band a little bit.
Fantastic. You have to brand an Elliott quartet.
We're working on it. Yeah, I'd say that's the thing we do in our house is play music together. So
that's great. Hopefully you have a drummer in that mix.
We do. Declan's the drummer. Declan is 7 years old. 7 years old, he can play Avenged Sevenfold. He's a really good drummer. He's actually the other day, he just started kicking in like double bass pedal fluidly. And I was like, you know what's amazing about kids is if you don't tell them that something's impossible, they just do it. Like, I could not do that if you sat me down there for 5 years.
That's awesome. That's
so,
fantastic.
yeah.
2 last questions, and then I want to do a little lightning round. We'll come to at the end. Catch us up on, you're working in NORAD now.
Yes.
Tell us about that experience.
Pretty exciting times. So if you casually peruse any TV channel, you'll see all the things that are NORAD and Northcom's responsibility right now. So like everything. Golden Dome for America is us. Southern Border is us. Everything that's going on with the federal protection missions in different U.S. cities is us. So it is amazing how much responsibility has come to NORAD and Northcom with this new administration's focus on homeland defense. The national security strategy was just released a couple days ago. Oh, wow. So now you can see publicly how much we are focused on homeland defense. That's actually been going on since January. We've always been there, right? So NORAD and Northcom have always been there. They've always had a pretty amazing role of like defending the continent of North America.
And I did not appreciate when we talked about earlier, Canada and up to Alaska is included. That's fascinating.
Absolutely, right? So when you look at the way the global force laydown is for the United States, we have comms and commands throughout the globe. Indo-PACOM for the Indo-Pacific, EUCOM for Europe, and NORTHCOM, as you can imagine, is North America. So that's America's Homeland Defense Command. When you add Canada to the mix under one commander, that's NORAD. And that has been around since '58.
I have a kind of a lay question from a couple of years ago, and this may get into the classified territory, so you may cut me off, but there was a big balloon traveling over like the north part of the country.
That's
and
us.
for
It was not us. We did not make the balloon. We shot the balloon. Yes, that was NORAD.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. So high altitude balloons are a problem for us. There were actually several of them.
Wow.
And
do we know the origin? Okay.
That's probably what you think it is.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Not friendly. Not there for good reasons.
Well, there was a few days where I think obviously the government was reviewing and or monitoring them, and of course everyone was curious as to what was going on.
So it's a challenging problem when you look at. You have to think why. So we've got satellites in space that are looking at us all the time. So why a balloon? Why would you send an air-breathing thing that floats around and is very vulnerable and easy to shoot down? Well, it turns out there's some good reasons for it. For example, imagine, if you will, that your goal was to get locked onto so that you could transmit a signal back home, which when you look at a problem set like that, you're like, if I shoot that may be giving them exactly what they want.
Right.
So how do you handle that situation? And you have to somehow shut down the communication and then take care of the problem. Wow. So none of these things are simple. When you look at homeland defense, our adversaries are smart.
Right.
They may be bad, but they're smart.
As a big student of history as well, back at Columbia when I was a student there, I took a World War II course with a professor, Elihu Rose, who's no longer teaching, but was an amazing professor, great historian, and ended up writing a paper on the Army Air Force. Okay. And at the time, the bomber for the Army Air Force, the Fortress. And as you think about kind of the little bit of a historical question around aircraft as they've improved, become more efficient, which aircraft would you point to in the current, arsenal, whether it's fighters, bombers, cargo planes, what have you? Which do you think represent the biggest advancement that we've had in the Air Force?
Yeah. You can really place them at the generational breaks. It's not well understood. I think you hear the terms 4th gen, 5th gen fighters, 6th gen fighters all the time. So much so that I think a little bit of a comprehension loss is happening in our population for what those things mean. So, when you talk about a 4th generation fighter, that's F-15, F-16. That is a high supersonic aircraft with multi-role capability, with a long-range radar that has standoff missile capability, and that was the principle of our force for a long time. 5th generation fighter, stealth, right? So F-22, F-35, now they're all those things, but also they're invisible to radar. And so leap in technology. And so you can trace this all the way back to 1st generation, 2nd generation, and so on. 6th generation, I will tell you right now that when you hear China's 6th generation fighter, what they mean is 5th generation fighter. There's nothing that has actually advanced in their 6th generation fighter. They just wanted a bigger number.
Right.
We are, however, working on a 6th generation fighter for real. It's called the F47. We were finally able to publicly reveal that. Back in, I think it was this year. So very recently, we were able to say that. I can tell you, I saw one a long time ago.
Okay.
And it is real and it's awesome. And that next generation, it's a big leap. And it's, it is a little bit more stealth. Yep, that's true. Is it faster? Not really. But it's looking at a lot of the things you talked about in your last podcast. How do we make fighter design modular so that when the problem changes, we change with it? And not 30 years from now when we come up with a new, perfectly molded machine. So you're going to see some pretty innovative things with the F47. It's probably not even one thing. It's multiple. So 6th generation is imminent.
Wow.
I can't say when, but it's imminent.
Okay.
And so what's important about that is we continue at enormous expense, right? Enormous cost. We continue to be the ones that drive the fight. And I want to talk about that a little bit because I think it's just the American way. It's not efficient to be the first person to build something new. And it's really expensive and it's, right. And it gets copied very quickly. But the advantage of it is what our engineers have to go through to get there. And it may not be the most efficient thing. It may not even be the best thing, but our engineers are the ones that had to solve that problem. I'm going to go back to F-35 for a second. When we gave the prompt to industry to say, I need a stealth, supersonic, vertical takeoff airplane. Impossible, right? Like come up with a way to make a machine take off like a Harrier, be completely stealth after transforming, and then also go supersonic and somehow be efficient at the same time. And they did it. And it took a long time, but they did it. And now American engineers are that much better.
I am extremely proud to be in the United States because for all of our flaws, we are a very introspective culture. We put it all out there. All the things that allow our adversaries to try to divide us is because we criticize ourselves constantly. That's actually a good thing. We are an engaged population. We are willing to look at our flaws. We push boundaries. We drive forward. We drive innovation. We drive new things. That is the American way of life. And I wouldn't change it for the world. So as you guys leave here, just remember what you stand for and the why behind what you're doing. What you bring to our country is the most important of resources, which is energy, so that we can drive everything else.
I didn't think we'd touch the Top Gun movie as many times as we did, but if you were to compare the Top Gun movie and that experience versus Thunderbirds, what are you most proud of between those two movies?
They're both really good. Maverick, the whole team went to watch it. When it came out, we were actually we were in Indianapolis.
Oh, that's great.
And so we all went to watch it and we all left and we were like, it's pretty accurate actually. It's there are a few authenticity hits. At one point, Maverick's leading a diamond through a canyon. It's not the best formation for that. Especially with number 4 on top of number 1, where you actually can't see down in the cockpit, so that wouldn't work. But other than that, the G-force replication was excellent.
Wow.
The concept of how hard they push is actually really, really accurate. It's a good cultural review of the community, honestly. When I look at comparatively, I mean, one is an actual real story.
Right.
And
real pilots.
The other one's made up. Other than that, they're both excellent, but I'm pretty proud to be a part of the one that actually happened. But the guy that filmed Top Gun Maverick, Kevin LaRosa, he filmed our movie as well.
Oh, wow.
So that's, you can see it. You can see the aerial shots are unbelievable. The things I never would have thought of.
Yeah.
Also, the hardest approval process I've been through in my life was, hey, boss, we're going to put a helicopter in the middle of our demonstration.
I was going to ask if it was a drone or a helicopter. It was a helicopter.
It was Kevin LaRosa in his aircraft with Simmer, who was number 8,
oh my gosh.
in the cockpit as well, kind of making sure he doesn't hit things. There were some closer moments than I want to admit to.
That's amazing. I mean, yeah, the footage is just it's exhilarating to see it, and just as much as Top Gun, if not more. Just to see the symphony of the planes together, all the requirements and pressures that you guys were, I'm sure, going through in every maneuver. No, that's amazing. Maybe a last question. Any final things on the Air Force or the Thunderbirds in particular that you wanted to share?
Just really exciting times right now as we are modifying our acquisitions processes and moving forward very quickly. Yeah, I think we're at a time right now that's pretty exciting. I think for anyone who's on the fence, the Air Force is a good place to be right now because we're just coming out of the post 9/11, 20 years in Afghanistan, what I'll call a conflict where I was never really concerned about being shot down by another airplane. And we're now preparing for conflicts that we are absolutely going to get shot at by other airplanes. So this modernization bow wave is hitting right now. And it's exciting. It's really amazing to see what the Air Force is doing and what the combatant commands are doing. There's a lot of change going on right now. And it's going to drive energy into the system, which is going to lead to a lot of innovation and a lot of forward thinking. So pretty exciting times.
I think maybe one final comment for me before we get to the lightning round. Astro, you've been successful at integrating our first podcast themes and ideas into this one, which is fantastic. But second, I think we've touched on the themes of AI, technology, energy, entrepreneurship, and finance in the context of some of the assets you've touched. But thank you for all of the insights. Quick lightning round. This is more to get to know you as an individual. A series of 5 or 6 questions just to get a little bit more to the Astro kind of in you. Biggest passion outside of the Air Force and family?
Music. Yeah, music.
Awesome.
Playing guitar with my little guys is what I get up for now.
Fantastic. Favorite book?
I got to go back a little bit, but American Generalship, Character is Everything. Really spoke to me very early on, walking through all the historic generals from Civil War on and what they had to deal with.
Fascinating. Got to check that one out. I think I know the answer to this one, but favorite movie?
Hang on, let me think about that for just, man.
And it's Thunderbirds, not Top Gun.
It's actually, it's probably Star Wars. I know you've already had that answer, but
Chris
if you
gave that same answer.
It is. Yeah, it's probably Star Wars. Now, if I say the episode, that's going to bring a lot of controversy. I'll tell you right now. Episode 8 is my favorite.
Okay.
And there are people who think that is the worst thing ever made. Right? Like episode 3 and 8 are my ones. And
you got a great audience here. Yeah. Fascinating. That's fantastic.
I thought there's a lot of depth in it, but man, people hate that. I don't know why.
That's great. Of course, for my youngest daughter, any pets in the household?
We don't have any pets in the household. We have a lot of bears that live in our yard, though. So I live in Colorado Springs right now. We've got easily six bears that I could tell you which one it is because they're in our yard that often, which I have a 9 and a 7-year-old. It's a little bit of a threat, but they're very peaceful actually when you don't bother them.
That's awesome. For my oldest daughter, her question was around technology. What's some personal technology that you use? AI tools, anything?
Yeah, so in my private life, not much. In fact, right now I would say I'm trying to steer my kids away from it, only because there's a thrill in making music and doing things yourself that's still very human. And I think that's important. And so absolutely it's helpful to have AI write music for you and it's certainly an augmentation. But for the little guys right now, I need their brains turned on. So I'm having them learn about the power of give and feel.
Fantastic.
So not much, for your daughter, I'll say that. A lot of technology in my work life, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
In fact, there's, you can tell her there was an AI dogfight 5 years ago now where we had, it was simulated, but we had an AI pilot fight a real pilot. The AI had perfect data, so it didn't have to scan and sense and all that stuff, and it won every time.
Wow.
It won every time. But you can also tell her we're not there yet on large-scale combat with imperfect information. When you talk about the reality of combat where I don't know what I'm seeing and the enemy disappeared, they're somewhere, I don't know where. The human brain is much better at going, okay, I have no information, so I'm going to drive the fight.
Right.
And I'm going to drive this situation to where I'm generating a feedback loop that the enemy has to respond to, whereas the computer was kind of throwing its hands up like, as soon as I see somebody, I'll do something about this.
Last question from my son. He is currently in a debate organization at Kincaid, and for CX policy debate, the topic this year is exploration in the Arctic. So he wanted me to ask you about, has NORAD touched the Arctic, and how does that factor in?
Oh, yeah. You've come to the right place. So General Guillot, who's my 4-star, like his combatant command, NORAD Northcom, the Arctic is in their area of responsibility. And, you can tell your son, the Russians, when they fly their bombers at North America, they go through the Arctic every time. So Alaska is an Arctic area, right? And so is Northern Canada, and they are very much in play. And it's a whole different problem set. When you talk about logistics of moving fighter forces into bases that are -70, always. And just to tie it together, you hear about Greenland a lot in the news right now. Well, that's why. Because Greenland is very strategically oriented in the Arctic, especially some of its northern bases that reach that circle. Tell him to look at the map from the North Pole. Find a map online that's not the side view that we're all used to, but look at it from the North Pole, because that's what all the NORAD and Northcom maps in the building look like. And when you look at that perspective of the globe, you see how important the Arctic is, and you see where the real borders between the U.S. and Russia are. And they're a lot closer than you think.
Fascinating. Thank you, Astro, for all of these insights. Really enjoyed the conversation, and look forward to catching up more.
Thanks, Charlie. It's awesome to be here.
Astro, thanks for sharing what leading the Thunderbirds taught you about trust, precision, and building teams that perform at the highest level. If this conversation sparked something for you, please subscribe to Talon Talks and share it with someone who needs to hear it. We'll be back soon with more conversations on energy, AI, entrepreneurship, and investing. This is your host, Charlie Lycum. Thanks for listening.